Around 5,000 years ago, something wiped out nearly every male bloodline on Earth. No written records, no stories passed down. But the pattern was too precise to be random. It wasn't disease, famine, or natural disaster. What happened was deliberate. Male bloodlines didn't just decline, they were erased. Entire lineages vanished, suddenly and everywhere, across nearly every continent. And the strangest part, women were unaffected. Their genetic legacy carried on. But for men, something had intervened. Something so targeted, so widespread. It left only a faint scar hidden in our DNA, a scar that shows 95% of all men disappeared in just a few generations. And for thousands of years, no one noticed, not until now. This wasn't a slow decline, it was a rupture. One moment, thousands of male lineages branched across continents. The next, they were gone. Geneticists call it a Y-chromosome bottleneck, a sudden collapse in the number of men who passed on their genes. And it didn't happen in one region. It swept across Europe, Central Asia, the Middle East, and parts of Africa. Meanwhile, the maternal lines passed down through mothers remained stable. The evidence was hidden in plain sight, buried deep within the Y chromosomes of men alive today. Something or someone had removed most men from the gene pool, not by chance, but with precision. But to understand the scale of what happened, we need more than numbers. We need evidence, and it was waiting, not in books, but in blood. This collapse wasn't gradual. It was a break, sharp and absolute. Researchers expected slow genetic drift. Instead, they found a cliff. The male family tree narrowed abruptly. Whole lineages were missing. And yet, archaeology offers no matching story. No burned cities, no legends of catastrophe. Still, the DNA is conclusive. This wasn't random chance. 'Twas removal, deliberate, repeated, and precise. Male-targeted elimination on a massive scale. So the question becomes, why? What could cause a global collapse in male lineage without leaving monuments behind? To answer that, we have to go further back before writing, before nations, and before war as we know it. At the root of it all was a shift in how humans lived. For tens of thousands of years, people survived by moving, hunting, gathering, and adapting. Conflict existed, but it was brief, personal, even intimate. Then came the Neolithic Revolution. Farming, settlements, storage, and land. Humans began to claim territory, and with territory came something new: ownership. Now land wasn't just where you lived. It was something to protect, something to pass on. And once land could be inherited, power became a bloodline. The struggle wasn't just survival, it was control. As societies settled, they also began to divide. But what changed inside those settlements was even more profound. Agriculture didn't just feed more people, it created new winners and losers. In foraging bands, status was fluid. Leadership changed, but in settled societies, strength became legacy. The most dominant men didn't just control land, they controlled future generations. Over time, a small number of men fathered most of the children. Others were pushed out. Some were enslaved. Some simply never reproduced. And as this cycle repeated, generation after generation, male genetic diversity collapsed. It didn't require armies, just quiet control century after century. Bloodlines disappeared, not because of death alone, but because of social exclusion so effective and so enduring it silenced entire male histories. And in time, those erasures began to show up in the soil itself. Where writing fails, the earth speaks. At Talheim in Germany, a pit dating back 7,000 years held 34 bodies, many with crushed skulls. Men, women, and children, all thrown together. In Koszyce, Poland, another grave contained 15 people from the same family, buried carefully. Most were women and children, but the adult men were missing, gone without a trace. In some cases, men were killed elsewhere. In others, their deaths were methodical, bound arms, blows to the skull, and executions from behind. These weren't chaotic raids. They were cold and selective removals. And these patterns weren't rare. Across Europe and Central Asia, site after site reveals the same conclusion. Entire groups of men were being wiped out. But this wasn't just about death. It was about the systems that made such killings possible. There was no single war, no empire marching across borders. What happened was slower, colder, and more insidious. Men became threats to other men, not as enemies in battle, but as rivals for power, inheritance, and reproductive success. Anthropologists now believe this wasn't a sudden genocide. It was a pattern, thousands of micro-conflicts, each removing the defeated males from the gene pool. In some cases, they were cast out. In others, enslaved, or simply killed. And yet, women were often spared, married into new communities, absorbed, and their DNA passed on, even as the male lines around them vanished. This wasn't an accident. It was a design, one that worked so well it nearly erased male genetic history itself. But what made it possible to erase an entire gender's legacy with such precision? Unlike mitochondrial DNA, which passes through both sons and daughters, the Y chromosome only travels from father to son. It is a fragile line, and one break can erase an entire branch. During this period, that break happened repeatedly. Not because of illness, and not due to random migration. Other theories, like natural disasters, changing climates, or shifts in fertility, still can't explain why men disappeared while women did not. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. A blade cutting cleanly through paternal lines again and again, as male after male was erased from the future. There were no tombs and no tales, only silence. It was targeted. It was calculated. Entire clans were undone in a single generation. And once a male lineage ended, it ended forever. There was no recovery and no second chance. No one to carry the name and no one left to remember. The silence of that extinction still echoes in our blood. What survives today is the residue of that purge. A tiny group of male bloodlines passed down through the narrowest genetic funnel in human history. Every living man today descends from the few who made it through. Those whose lines, for reasons still debated, were spared. The rest are gone, not in story, but in silence. Their names, their faces, and their voices were lost before they were ever written down, and their only trace is absence. A quiet void where thousands of family trees should have stood. It's a great vanishing, hidden not in ruins or bones, but in the missing branches of our DNA. But something stopped it. Something changed. The purge halted, the freefall slowed, and a new stability took hold. The question is, what broke the cycle? What force, what shift finally brought the purge to an end? Eventually, humanity changed again. Violence didn't end, but it evolved. The rise of early civilizations brought structure, writing, law, and tax systems. Kings ruled not by strength alone, but through institutions. And as male lineages stabilized, genetic diversity began to slowly recover. Warfare shifted from personal vendettas to planned campaigns. Power became bureaucratic, and control passed through systems rather than swords. Instead of constant bloodline purges, society found new ways to manage conflict, but the damage had already been done. The purge had passed, but it left a lasting mark, one we wouldn't recognize until 5 millennia later, and that legacy still echoes in every man alive today. Modern men all carry the imprint of this forgotten war. It isn't carved in stone or written in scrolls, but it is etched deep in our DNA. The Y chromosome, once scattered across countless branches of human ancestry, now traces back to a narrow handful of survivors. We don't know their names, we don't know what they looked like, and we don't know what they did to endure. But we know they made it. While thousands of other lineages vanished without a trace, they held on. Line after line collapsed around them, and still they remained. Their survival wasn't by chance. It came through dominance, through resilience, through cunning, and through alliances or betrayals. Maybe it came through instinct, or war, or violence, too brutal to be remembered. Whatever it was, it worked. Because when the dust settled, theirs were the only lines left standing. And now, their legacy is the only one that remains. Every man alive today is a descendant of their triumph, not just of survival, but of supremacy. They became the last thread in a fraying fabric, the only bridge between the past and the future. A few, chosen by fate or force, rewrote the map of human inheritance. This wasn't a war told in books. No scribes recorded it, no songs were sung, and it left no cities in ruin. No kingdoms toppled, and no statues were raised in victory. But it reshaped the human race, not with swords, but with silence. Not with fire, but with erasure. A quiet war, waged in shadows, one that rewrote the future by deleting most of the past. A war without witnesses, won by those who left no evidence behind, except us. History celebrates kings, empires, and revolutions. But before all of them, humanity fought a quieter war, one that decided who would carry our future. It wasn't fought in palaces. It was fought in villages, in fields, and in the unspoken rules of inheritance. There were no monuments, no tales carved in stone, only a silence that rewrote everything, not with blades, but with absence. And this was just one story. A single thread in a tapestry we were never meant to forget. History doesn't whisper. It waits, quiet and patient, until someone listens. Subscribe and bring the past back into the light.